all of you, but just for time's sake, I probably won't do introductions with each of you individually because that'll probably take up a big chunk of our time, but it's nice to meet all of you. I do just kind of want to state the obvious that yes, I am maybe not an older adult or younger person that you're looking at here today. And I have been practicing in the field for quite some time, and I work with folks of all ages. And this is definitely an area of interest for me because I would like to be having sex at any age and engaging with that as part of my life. And so this has been a big kind of passion project of mine, and I hope that you get something out of our chat today. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about, and maybe the answer to this is already yes, because you are here today, or maybe you thought we were covering some other topic and now you're trying to figure out how to exit Zoom now that you know we're talking about sex. But my first question to all of you, and not to necessarily answer out loud right now, but just to ask yourself is sex and sexuality important to you now? And why? I wonder what's brought you here today, just as something to kind of think about and keep in mind as we're talking about this. And another question I'd like for you to ask yourself is, what role has sex played in your life? And what role do you want it to play? So maybe you're here because it's been something you haven't thought about for some time, or you thought maybe it's not important to me anymore. Or, oh, I've been dying to have this and connect with myself and others, and I just don't know how to do it anymore. Nobody talks about this. Um, and the question I can't really decide for you is, should this be important to you? One thing I can say is that a healthy sexual practice, even with yourself, no partner needed, is important to overall health and wellness. It can increase blood flow to vital organs, including your pelvic floor, which can help with bathroom movement, pretty much anything, holding up your entire body. Obviously, it's been shown to improve connection with others, which can decrease your sense of loneliness, help elevate your mood. And it's a great exercise option, even if it's just for you. And so I can tell you from a therapist and health perspective that yes, this is an important thing to do. It should be part of our overall health and wellness, but it's not often considered that way or talked about that way from doctors and things like that. So the last question I guess I would want you to keep in mind as we're talking today is, if it hasn't been an important part of your life lately or for a long time, how did this part of your health, how did sex become less important? Was it because other things got in the way, or you thought there wasn't space for it, or you didn't have a partner, so you thought it couldn't happen without a partner? So just kind of a frame to keep these in mind as we're chatting today. And yes, I do want to hear all of your questions. I will try to keep an eye on the chat, and I will be happy to answer them later as we go on. So just a couple assumptions I want to go over that you may already know and experience because you have lived it or are living it. But I just really want to name them and get them out in the open. So in our culture, people, especially if you're living in LA, folks who are maybe considered sexy or pleasurable or pleasure able, meaning having the ability to receive and give pleasure, are often just seen as young folks with no disabilities, who are physically functioning and thin and white. And there's kind of all these assumptions that we have around what is attractive and who is pleasurable and pleasure able in our culture. And the reason for this is, whether it's looking at pop culture or media or the movies that we see, we often don't see older adults having sexy times, in the programs that we're viewing or watching. But also a big proponent that kind of adds to that narrative is the medical and healthcare system. And so I don't know if any of you are willing to share with any kind of show of hands or anything like that, but how many of you have maybe gotten prescribed medication or had some kind of surgery that potentially affected some kind of sexual or relational functioning, but the doctor did not tell you that it would have that effect? Yeah, so a lot of doctors and healthcare providers out there are not required to take any classes in human sexuality, meaning that they're probably dealing with their own taboos around sex and sexuality, that they don't feel comfortable talking about it, and they have no experience with it. Even OBGYNs, so gynecologists, are not required to take any classes in human sexuality, meaning that they can have their hands on you and in you, but they have no idea about anything really human sexuality related. And so our medical and healthcare system really adds to this because they're not telling people what are the possible impacts of some of the things that are going on for you, what's going to happen to your body around sex and relationships as we age. Another thing to keep in mind around assumptions around sex and aging is what you were taught growing up or probably not taught. So, our sex education in this country is still pretty lacking, but narratives around sex and relationships are often not discussed, especially for older adults, but really for anyone. That's kind of why I got into this field. And so, a lot of folks, maybe including yourselves or people you've been with, have not had any sex ed or relationship education. Um, Another thing is depending on how you were raised or where you were raised or your religion or spirituality or personal cultural practices, there may be some gender role things going on where you might not have been given permission to prioritize your sexuality, to prioritize your pleasure. And so these are things that all add to that, going back to that question of why haven't you prioritized sex if it's something that's maybe gotten lost over time or over the years. Okay, so again, you might know some of these things, whether it's because you've experienced it or it's happened to you, whether your doctor has shared it with you or not. But I'm just going to do a little overview of some expected changes that happen over time. And even if it's something you've experienced, I think it's important for us to just name this because sometimes these changes happen and nobody talks about it. And so there's kind of this quiet shame that can happen with changes to our bodies, to our emotional state. So body changes. I would say a first thing, obviously, that can happen is the way you look changes. And so if you are being impacted by cultural views on what is attractive, what is sexy, how you view yourself, how you look at yourself, how you look at your skin, how you look at your changing body, the way you feel about yourself, that's obviously going to impact the way you show up or want to show up with other people. Another thing is this theory of if you don't use it, you lose it. I don't know if anyone has heard this saying before. It was quoted in a funny movie called The 40-Year-Old Virgin. But there is some truth to this. And so, for sex or any muscle in the body, if you are not using it and practicing it, you can temporarily lose functioning or blood flow to that part of your body. And so, what I mean by this is basically more sex creates more sex. And so this doesn't mean that if you haven't been using it, it's lost or it's gone forever, but it may mean that you haven't picked up this kind of weight or this muscle to flex for a long time. And so that means that muscles can atrophy, whether that be your brain muscle of what it takes and looks like to get aroused, or whether that be your genitals in terms of blood flow to that area. And so the key part about kind of maintaining some kind of sexual and relational connection over time is flexing it like a muscle, just like walking or going to the gym or doing aerobics or anything like that. Things that can happen to the body, again, for people with penises, that's going to be less blood flow for rigidity. So that means struggling to maybe get an erection, keep an erection, or maintain an erection over time. For people with vaginas, we're looking at potentially less lubrication and less elasticity, meaning that the skin becomes thin and potentially more sensitive. Then, of course, as you probably know, hormones are changing, or maybe there's a lack of hormones. And as a result, there are medications that can help with that, but sometimes medications we're taking can hinder that. So let's say blood pressure medications or heart medications or pain medications. All of these things can have potential sexual and body side effects that your doctor may or may not have talked to you about. Another thing is back pain or back issues. So if you are suffering with any kind of back pain or back struggles, this can obviously impact the nerves and things in your body, and that can include your sexual organs. And so if you have been struggling with any kind of pain like this, it is important that you see, well, how could this be maybe impacting what's going on for me desire-wise or sexually? Same for any kind of chronic pain, because if you wake up and you're dealing with pain all day, that's going to deplete your resources to have the energy to deal with other things, as you probably know. And so that includes maybe prioritizing sex or things that maybe you see as not maybe necessary for your day to day. The main thing that I want to highlight in body changes is at the bottom of this screen. And it is basically something called spontaneous versus responsive desire. Just by a show of hands, has anybody heard this term before? Spontaneous versus responsive desire. Okay, I think I saw one hand. Okay, so I'll try to go over this as quickly as I can. But essentially, when we get into a relationship or when we're younger or just starting in some kind of connection with another person, we think, and this is also impacted by the movies that we watch and romantic comedies, we think that sexual connection is supposed to look spontaneous, right? You meet this person, or you know this person, or you see them from across the room. We've kind of been taught that if you love or care about somebody, that you should just want to jump into bed with them or want to have sex with them if it's right, if the connection is right, and if there's quote unquote chemistry. And this is just not true over time. And so spontaneous desire kind of looks like, okay, the wind blows, nothing happened, and all of a sudden you have an erection or you are feeling erotically charged and you are ready to go and have sex. This is usually true for younger people, for people early on in relationships, for people who've been together for maybe a year, a couple months. And it's often more true for people who have penises. But for people in long term relationships, and as time goes on, their desire looks more responsive. And what I mean by that is if you are in the camp where you say, well, I don't think about sex ever, and I don't care if I have sex again, um, that could be fine if that is your prerogative and it's not impacting your life. That is totally your call, your decision, your body. But know that if you are waiting or we're waiting for some kind of spontaneous desire to come up, that you might be waiting forever. And so, more people, especially in long term relationships, especially over time, have more of what's called responsive desire. And what responsive desire is that you don't have a desire to engage sexually until your body becomes physically aroused. And so, what I mean by that is, like I said, if you're just waiting for this spontaneous thought, it's not going to happen, as opposed to what can I do, or what can I do with a partner to start to arouse my body, either with exercise or with soft touching or really spending time. And I'm not saying you should force yourself if you're not in the mood or if you really don't want to have sex. It's more about the idea of being open to getting turned on and then seeing, like, okay, can I do something to arouse my body? And then once my body is physically aroused, meaning it's kind of getting turned on or just activated, then I notice that I have this desire, or then I remember, oh, yeah, I liked having sex, or I used to like having sex. And so if you are one of most people who is maybe waiting for this spontaneous thing to happen, think again and ask yourself, is there anything I can do to be open to the idea of having some erotic thoughts, some desire? And what would it take for me to arouse my physical body, and then see if I have some desire and am open to acting on it? This, I think, is really key. So we're talking about a lot of maybe the challenges that come with age, but there is a lot of research and a lot of folks who say that sex can get better as we age. Some of the reasons for this, if you're open to it, is you might know more what you want. You've been living with yourself for longer. So hopefully you've gotten to know yourself a bit more. You might know a little more what you want. You might know yourself a bit more. You might decide, well, I don't want to waste my time with stuff that I don't like anymore. And no kids and no pregnancies. And so, for a lot of folks who have been able to embrace these pieces, they actually say, well, sex is a lot better because now I can say what I want, how I want it. I know what I like. I know what I'm capable of. I don't have time for the bullshit. And I don't have to worry about taking care of kids. Some great resources for this, and I'll get more to resources towards the end. I love these two books. One is called Prime, It's a book by a researcher named Pepper Schwartz. And another is by Joan Price. She is amazing. I will talk more about her. We'll watch a little video clip from her. And she's got so many great books. One of my favorites is called Naked at Our Age. Check these out. These are some wonderful resources that will go even more in depth than what we can cover in our short time together today. So other changes that can happen, of course, there's potential emotional changes. How are you feeling about the physical changes that are happening? How are you viewing them? Are you feeling angry and bitter and resentful and in grief? Or are you trying to roll with the punches? Are you finding humor in things? Are you finding ways to stay connected to others? How are your relationships doing with friends, with family, with yourself? Where are you at emotionally? Because that's going to affect how you can and if you want to show up for any kind of sexual or erotic space. Another thing that's going to change is don't assume that you like the things that you used to like. So, what you like, how you like to be touched, and where, with what frequency, with what pressure, is going to change over time. So, don't assume it's going to be the same. I kind of refer to this, and a lot of researchers and authors refer to this as our brakes and accelerators. And so, kind of, if you imagine yourself like a little bit of a car, we all have different, if we're all different cars, we all have different brakes and accelerators. So, the brakes are the things that kind of, slow us down in terms of sex and arousal, the things that maybe get in the way, whether that be pain, whether that be I can't even begin to think of being turned on if the house is messy or if the dishes aren't done or if the dogs are barking. So the brakes are the things that pull us out of the moment, that get in the way, sort of the barriers to connecting intimately with ourselves and with others. And the accelerators is the gas pedal. So those are the things that turn us on, the things that we like. If you're not sure what these are for you, my invitation would be to think of a time when you had some pleasurable sexual experience. And again, this might change. Let's say it was a long time ago. Maybe you won't like the same things. But just to kind of get a feel for these brakes and accelerators, I want you to pick a time when the sex was great with yourself, with somebody else, and to think about what was it about that situation that allowed it to be pleasurable. And everything from the setting, that could be the lighting, that could be the time of day, that could be what the person looked like, that could be what you were wearing, that could be what you were smelling, in as much detail as possible. What were the things that allowed it to be enjoyable? And then on the flip side, think of a time when it didn't happen, or when things didn't go well, or when someone, maybe a potential husband, wife, partner, asked you to get intimate and you were like, absolutely not. What was it about the way it was approached, the setting, the situation? What made you not open to the idea? If you're needing some help with this, here is another great resource I really like. One is a book called Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. And she also has an accompanying website that has these great worksheets that can help you kind of work through what are my brakes and accelerators and what's getting in the way for me to have the kind of connections that I'm wanting, that I'm looking for. Okay. And yes, we talked about responsive versus spontaneous desire. Another thing to consider is mismatched desire. So if you are partnered with somebody, know that I don't think I know any couple that is completely matched up in terms of their levels of desires. And so for this, you kind of want to ask yourself and ask your partner, what is their expectation for how often they're wanting to connect? What time of day are they more open to connecting? What's your ideal, with what kind of people, at what time? And this isn't usually going to line up with a partner in a relationship. And so this is something that every partnership has to navigate. It doesn't have to be the end of something. It's really just the beginning of a conversation of how can we work together, knowing that we're two different people with these mismatched desires. Maybe your partner's a little more responsive, maybe you're a little more spontaneous with your desire, but this is something that every partnership at every age has to work through. Okay, tools. So since I've been chatting at you for a bit, I am going to take a break for 1 second to show you a little video clip. Oh, maybe I won't be able to. Let's see.
Let's talk about...
Can people hear that? You might not be able to see it, but were you able to hear that when I pressed play? Okay, so you won't be able to hear her, but at least you'll be able to have a listen. Probably some copyright stuff with screen sharing. But the audio that I'm going to play is from Joan Price. That's the person I was quoting before. So Joan is a really amazing advocate for ageless sexuality. I think she's about 80 something now. She's got a great website. She's got a great blog. She has a myriad of books. That one called Naked at Our Age. She also has a great one about sex after grief. And she also has a blog where she reviews sex toys from a senior perspective, for everything from pain to arthritis to whatever, one might be going through. And this clip that I'm going to play the audio for you is from a video that she did. So she actually paired with a pornography education company to create this amazing educational video called Jessica Drake's Guide to Wicked Sex, Senior Edition. And so it's really awesome. Highly recommend it. It's like a 2-hour video. So I'm just going to play this audio. Sorry you don't get to see her, but give it a listen.
Penises. It's a normal sign of aging that erections become less dependable and less firm. You may have medical problems that result in no erections. That doesn't mean sex is over for you or your partner. You can give and receive sexual pleasure without an erection. You can have satisfying orgasms with a soft penis. Did you know that? So practice pleasuring yourself and teach your partner how to pleasure you. We grew up thinking that a hard penis penetrating a willing vagina was the only kind of real sex for heterosexuals. PIV, that's penis in vagina, was supposed to be the goal of sex. If you're close to my age, I'm 75, you'll remember that women who did not reach orgasm during PIV were called frigid. We know now that 75% of women do not reach orgasm through PIV alone. We need clitoral stimulation. The truth is that worrying about getting and staying hard enough for PIV causes performance anxiety. This sets up the fight or flight response that makes erections even less likely. Focusing on PIV as the goal interferes with the pleasure and intimacy of sex and may lead to avoiding sex altogether. The solution? Focus on giving and receiving pleasure. Explore sensation without goals. What we used to think of as foreplay can be a thrilling finale, not just the warm-up. Relax into the pleasure and stop seeing a goal, a predetermined next step. Maybe penetrative sex will be part of it, maybe it won't. There's no goal but pleasure. Can we let go of those outdated notions that interfere with our sexual pleasure? Even though we know better intellectually, the myths still rule that only penetrative sex is real sex, that women should reach orgasm through intercourse, that men who don't have erections are deficient. All of these are false. How much happier we'd be if we let these myths go. Myths be gone. Lubricant is super important because our vaginas may not lubricate naturally anymore. But even with added lubricant, sometimes PIV is uncomfortable, even painful for the vagina, even when aroused. It's important to get the cause of the pain diagnosed. Many doctors are not knowledgeable about the many different types of vaginal pain. A pelvic floor therapist should be your next stop if your gynecologist doesn't have a solution. If your penis or clitoris is incapable of arousal or orgasm, don't assume it's due to age. It can be an early sign of heart disease, diabetes, a neurological disease, or another medical condition, or a side effect of your medical treatment or medication. Consult your doctor and do not settle for, well, what do you expect at your age? If you get that answer, and many of us do, divorce your doctor. Find one who is sex positive and age positive. I teach all my audiences this medical mantra for talking to your doctor about sexual concerns. Repeat after me. Doctor, my sexuality is important to me. Here's what's interfering with my sexual pleasure. Let's run the tests and figure out what's causing this. If you're not the right person to help me, refer me to someone who is. Isn't that empowering? We're not all partnered, and we need to understand that solo sex is real sex. Sexual pleasure does not require a partner. Our two hands, a favorite sex toy, and a fertile imagination are all we need. There are myriad health benefits to regular orgasms, once a week minimum, the experts say. Don't limit yourself to once a week if you're enjoying orgasms more often, understand. That's just the minimum for the health benefits. There's no upper limit. And if you're dealing with difficulty getting aroused, know that regular solo sex helps the penis or clitoris become engorged by increasing blood flow. The more you have sex, and I'm counting solo sex, the easier it is to get aroused and reach orgasms. My readers sometimes tell me, I've given up on sex until I find a partner. No, I tell them. Keep yourself sexually alive with regular orgasms. It's good for you, and it feels good. No partner required.
Okay, sorry you weren't able to see her, but that video I would highly recommend for anyone who this is speaking to. They also, just to give you a heads up on what the video is, so it's half educational, but it also features two real couples, and they show some hands-on ways to work through some of these things. And so I think it's really nice for folks to see diverse ages and body types being reflected in a hands-on educational way. And for some people, they find the video to be kind of sexy too. So I hope that you enjoy it if you check it out. So I wanted to give you a little listen from Joan, because obviously she's a big educator in this community. I've learned a lot from her in doing some work with her. And I just kind of wanted to let you hear her perspective a little bit on some of the things we're talking about. But now I just want to go over some like real tools, I guess, that you can use, knowing the things that we've been talking about. So just echoing what Joan said, what do you do now? So what to do first? First and foremost, like she said, if you are wanting to continue, restart, rekindle any type of sexual thing going on in your life, first and foremost, you need to rule in or rule out any physical causes. Physical meaning pain-related, medication you're taking, a hormonal imbalance, anything physical, so that you know what is maybe more emotional, what is more psychological, and so you can get an informed person in the healthcare profession to help you with this physical stuff. Sex should never hurt unless you want it to. And there are people that can really, there are practitioners that can really help you refine your pleasure. So if you have a urologist or a gynecologist that you have never been able to talk to about these things, or that doesn't sound informed, use that mantra, that Joan was talking about. Find a doctor. I'll give my email at the end. I'm happy to give referrals to doctors that I like in this field, but find a doctor who is sex and age positive and informed about sex and intimacy. So that would be someone like a urologist who is informed, or a urogynecologist who is informed. And either gender can go to a pelvic, or any gender can go to a pelvic floor therapist. If you don't know what that is, it's essentially a physical therapist for your pelvic floor, for your genitals. And so just like you might go for a knee injury or a back issue or a spine issue or a wrist issue, a pelvic floor therapist is a therapist for that part of your body, for this part of your health. They help with physical pain. They help with incontinence. They help with arousal, all sorts of things that involve that area of your body. And again, coming back to what Joan said, tell your doctor that sex is important to you and ask them about research on how different things going on in your life can affect you. Next thing to do, and I'm going to, since we don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to put this link in the chat. So if anybody does want to check out this link, it is basically talking about solo sex. And so something Joan mentioned is don't wait for a partner to explore this. It is like a muscle. It is important for your health, for the way you feel about yourself, for your confidence, and for your body ability and blood flow to practice being with yourself sexually. Not just for physical practice and arousal, but also to not rely on a partner for pleasure, to really and literally take it into your own hands. It's also key to know what you like and what you want. And so if you don't know what you like and want, if you haven't explored your own body or haven't explored it for quite some time, how are you going to tell someone else, if there is a someone else, what you like and what you want, and to feel confident in that? So one exercise that you can do for this is something I call body mapping. So if you can remember those maps that people used to carry in their cars, the Thomas guides that kind of had the entire map of everything and the topography of the region, it's basically doing that for your whole body. And so what this looks like is it is not a goal-oriented thing. It doesn't have to end in nudity. It doesn't have to end in orgasm. It doesn't have to end in penetration or sex. It's essentially going head to toe with your body and kind of taking your body on like a sensual touch date, to see, what do I like, how do I like, and where do I like it. So pretty much touching, caressing yourself with your hands, with different implements, with scarves, with water in the shower or the bath, whatever you can, and basing it on whatever your accessibility needs are, and just exploring your body head to toe. Like, is this a painful zone that I wouldn't want someone to touch? Oh, is this a spot that I actually really like being touched and I would love for someone to touch me there? And how would I like it? Do I want it soft? Do I want it scratchy? Do I want it tense and firm? Does it change based on the day if I've got something like fibromyalgia or whatever? So pretty much making a map of your body so that you know it and that you can explain it to a partner. And really set the scene for that body mapping exercise if you're going to do it. Like, put out some candles, put on some music you like, try to make sure you're not going to be interrupted, make sure you ask for that space. Don't rush yourself. Just really take the time to map out your body and what you like, what your limits are, and really try to get to know yourself, maybe for the first time or maybe again. Next key thing is communication. So obviously this is something that takes time and effort and energy and work. So I know that me just telling you these things isn't necessarily going to make you or your partner all of a sudden a great communicator. If you need help with that, come to a sex therapist or something like me. But just some key things for communication. How do you like to give and receive feedback? So let's say you have been intimate with a partner and you've just kind of faked it, or said that you were enjoying yourself when you weren't, or said that something wasn't hurting, or stayed in a position longer than felt comfortable for you because you thought you had to, or you were worried they were going to be offended or they were going to leave. Now you have the opportunity, if you would like to have pleasurable connections, is asking yourself, how do you like to give and receive feedback? For this, I'm a big fan of, excuse my language, but the shit sandwich technique, which essentially is say the nice thing, say the point of growth, and then say the nice thing. So instead of in the moment, let's say my partner's touching me a certain way and I don't like it, I'm not going to be like, oh, I hate when you do that, and just do that. Sometimes we can get there if we're annoyed or if we feel like we've told this person that before. But this technique instead is like, more framing it as a compliment or a positive. And so, for example, that would be, Oh, I so love that we're getting to spend this time together. And I do love when you touch me. I would love for you to touch me a little more like this in that area. That really turns me on. And I so love that you're open to my feedback. That usually leaves people a lot more open to receive whatever you're asking of them, whether it be we need to move because I'm in pain, or this, I don't like this position, and hopefully leaving them feeling open to receive it. Another thing to ask yourself is culturally, situationally, relationally, what, if anything, has stopped you from telling your partners before about what you like and what you want? Is it because you thought you didn't have permission? Is it because you thought they didn't care? Is it because you were worried they were going to leave? What's gotten in the way? And are you willing to let that keep getting in the way for the rest of your life? And next is, do you know what you like enough to share? So that's going back to that body mapping I was just talking about, is have you taken the time to get to know what you need, what you like, and what you want? And how confident do you feel to own those needs? The key thing for any of this is to really get creative and schedule spontaneity. And so I know this can sound a little bit like it doesn't fit together, like spontaneous should be spontaneous. Why schedule it? But in our day to day lives, whether it be because of kids, grandkids, health stuff, doctor's appointments, things you have to do, taxes, work, whatever it is easy to put sex and relationship stuff off or to think it's not important, which is why I asked you at the beginning, how important is this to you? And so key for this is scheduling a time with yourself and or with a partner if you have one, but it's totally fine to do it with just yourself if you're flying solo, to schedule being spontaneous. So why I say spontaneous is because sometimes people will set like a date night or a sex night, and sometimes that can be really pressure filled. And so if you are in a situation um, where you feel like you have to be into it or you have to want it. Maybe you're having a high pain day, or maybe you don't have a lot of energy that day. It's good to keep it spontaneous and instead just say, this is time I've dedicated to have some connected time with myself or with my partner. What happens in that time, we'll kind of decide in the moment and negotiate what we're feeling. But at least we've set aside time, we've scheduled it so that we know this is important to us and we're both committed to it being important. One way to do this that I really like is to create what's called a sex and intimacy menu. And so by menu, I mean, think of every possible thing you could think of that is somehow erotically related or connected and make it into a menu for yourself or with a partner. So if you were listening in that thing with that little clip with Joan, she was saying that, you know, culturally, we've relied so much just on penis and vagina or penis and something penetration as being the only way to experience pleasure and to have sex. Simply not true, but also that might be a limiting factor for you if you have pain or if your penis isn't working the way you know it used to. And so there are so many other ways to experience pleasure without penetration, with a flaccid penis, without anything going inside of you. And so this sex menu is an opportunity to think of everything you possibly can that you enjoy. That could be everything from kissing to cuddling to massage to sensual massage to time in a jacuzzi or a hot tub to oral sex to using some kind of a sex toy together, to watching an erotic video to reading some erotic books. So create this menu and pick something off the menu if you're feeling shy or like you don't know what you want to do, kind of like the ongoing argument that couples have of like, what do you want to eat? I don't know, what do you want to eat? You can have that and make it a little more fun around the sex menu. And my advice would be, if you are doing this, do it before you eat actual food dinner. It's important, if you're scheduling that spontaneity, schedule it during a time where you know you can be open to the idea of feeling connected, as opposed to waiting until the end of the night or after dinner when you're tired, when you're full, when you've reached your pain threshold. Give yourself a better chance of success by scheduling it smartly. Last thing I would say to think about is, how do you define sex? So, like Joan was talking about, in our culture, a lot of times sex has just been defined as penetration. Um, Unfortunately, I don't want to say unfortunately, but the truth is for people with vaginas, only about 10% or less experience orgasm from penetration alone. So I'll say that one more time. Only about 10% of people with vaginas experience orgasm from penetration alone. Most people, especially as we age, need something additional: external stimulation by hand, by vibrator, more intense stimulation, touching other parts of the body. And so, because of that, there has been a gap in our culture where a lot of times during a first or even ongoing encounter, more likely than not, the person with the penis is more likely and more reliable to have an orgasm, and the person with the vagina isn't, because there's this assumption that um, pleasure and how to get there looks the same for people with penises and people with vaginas. But it is not true, especially as we age. So, my invitation to you would be to broaden your definition of sex, especially if you are dealing with any kind of physical thing going on, whether your body's not responding as it used to, whether your penis can't get as hard or hard ever anymore, where your genitals hurt, maybe you can't stand, maybe you can't walk, maybe whatever it is. Maybe you're not interested in penetration. Broaden your definition of what sex can be. For some, it can just be cuddling or eye gazing or kissing or making out. A lot of times I see couples that have been together forever and they haven't made out since they first started dating, like really kissed passionately. So, really invite you to be creative, broaden your definition of sex, because if you do, you will have more sex because you will define it more broadly. And really, instead, trying to think of it as, instead of a goal oriented thing that ends with penetration or orgasm, more focus on pleasure. What brings us pleasure in our bodies together? And really just being connected to yourself and to another person. And on this topic, too, is what kind of sex is sex worth having? So people want to have some kind of sex or intimacy that they like or that they enjoy, and probably aren't craving it if it's not something they've liked or haven't felt heard or connected. So ask yourself, kind of going back to those brakes and accelerators, what has been a time that you really enjoyed, and what made it worth having? What would make it worth having again or continuing again? I'm just going to rush through this. I know we started late and I want to give chance for a couple questions. I don't know if we're allowed to go a few minutes over. That's up to your board and whoever can stay. Humor is key. So keeping that in mind for all of this: sex is weird, sex is funny, things happen throughout, smells, sounds. There are going to be times when something gets in the way, whether it be having to go to the bathroom, a colostomy bag, a sore muscle, a toe cramp, something you have to change. And so it is key to be able to work through this stuff to have any kind of sex with yourself or others. And so you need to ask yourself, what would it take, or what does it take to re-accelerate, to get open to the idea of getting turned on, and to normalize those things that happen when they are inevitably going to happen, because sex is funny and weird. Last thing I want to talk about is literal tools. So Joan was mentioning sex toys. Especially as we age, we may require more stimulation, meaning our body maybe isn't as sensitive, or maybe it's more sensitive than it used to be. And so go check out Joan Price's blog if you'd like a whole array of different toys and tools that she recommends. I like to call them sex tools, not toys, because there's so much more than toys. Like, yes, they can be fun. Yes, they are fun. And they are tools, just like chairs are tools, just like forks are tools, just like knee braces are tools, just like a cane is a tool. I think they kind of get a bad rap of like being this thing that people only turn to if the sex isn't working, as opposed to, as humans, we have evolved to use tools to make our lives easier, to make our lives better, to connect more with ourselves, with the things that we're doing. So tools, in the same way, are just as important for sex and connection. Some good ones that I just want to highlight before we wrap up. One is called the Hot Octopus. This is for people with penises. It does not require an erection. It basically kind of pulsates and vibrates, and a lot of people really enjoy it. But I think the key part of this is that there's no pressure to have an erection, because that can be really pressure filled, especially if your body's not responding the way you want it to. And age or not, that just happens. There's this kind of assumption in our culture that if you're a man, you're supposed to be able to get turned on and have sex whenever, wherever, under any circumstances. It's just not true. So this is one that kind of emphasizes that. Another thing, if you are into penetration and you are struggling with erection stuff that's going on, there are things like this, where you can put a soft or hard penis into a helper. I guess you could consider this like a wingman, basically. So if you or your partner are into the sensation of penetration, this helps you to not have the pressure of maintaining an erection, but still being able to have that penetration potential with a little tool. These are some tools that are great for body stuff that's going on. So if you are dealing with any sort of body pain, there's some great companies that help make things more comfortable. One company is called the Intimate Rider. They have created this chair down here. So if you have back pain, if you are not as strong as you used to be, this basically helps you to thrust without much effort and with minimal energy or back movement exertion. These two things that are colorful are pillows, and a variety of pillows for people with back pain, hip pain, to help you get into a position that is comfortable for you. These are just one of many, but if that's something that's going on for you, do a little shopping, check these out. And again, I would suggest going to Joan Price's blog. She again says that she reviews sex toys from a quote unquote senior perspective. So I think that can be really, really fun. So I'm just going to leave this up here as sort of a little bit of a summary. I know we're kind of up against time, but I wanted to get through as much of that as I could with you all. So if you have questions, if we're allowed to go over a few minutes, I am here and available and happy to answer your questions. If you are shy about asking questions, you can send a direct message to me in the chat. I would be happy to answer it anonymously for you. But I'm here if you have questions about what I chatted about, something personal, whatever you're comfortable asking.
Okay, if people want to just ask a question live, just unmute yourself and ask your question.
I know it can be a topic that
or comments.
Yeah. It's a topic that some people are nervous to ask questions about. So
I'll start out.
Okay, I'm going to put this is my website here. So if you do have a question, but you're not feeling confident to ask it in this space, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to try to answer it. But go for it, Susan.
Okay, so I'm just curious, what are some of the most common reasons that people come to you as a sex therapist?
I would say most common reasons would be that people are struggling to go from that spontaneous to responsive desire that I was talking about. So people feeling like they're not connecting anymore. They've forgotten how to connect. They have mismatched desire. So one person wants it more frequently at different times of day with having it look different. So having to navigate that and being together for longer periods of time. I think another one is just communication. Most people have not been taught to talk about this topic, have not practiced talking about this topic. It's scary, it's threatening, there's a lot of shame. So a lot of my work with probably everyone I work with is overcoming shame. And then the last one would be trauma. And I define trauma as anything that overwhelms the nervous system. So trauma could be something specific that has happened to you, that maybe other people would define as trauma, but it can also just be somebody said something horrible to you, or you had an ex that, really messed you up, or, we've all had some trauma experience. So those would be the main things.
Thank you.
Nicolette, I just want to thank you so much for the lovely presentation. I'm going to suggest we stop the recording to see if people want to ask questions without feeling like it has to be saved in memoriam.
Sounds good.
So why don't we do that? And then if you want to stop your screen share, we could all see each other. That might be better too.